Right, hello everyone. I make it 4 o'clock, so I think we will kick off now. Can I just check, Rob? Can you just quickly check you can hear me and I'm clear?
I can hear you and you're clear.
Fabulous, awesome. Thank you very much. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining for the third episode of OpenAthens101. I'm really glad we have so many of you today. I'm sure we'll get a few more numbers over the next couple of minutes, but in order to finish on time, I want to kick off now. So just a word of warning, I'm sure many of you have also been affected by Virgin Media recently, having a few Wi-Fi issues. So for the purpose of kind of maintaining a clear connection when we're speaking, we're not going to have our videos on for this. And just in case, I drop off as the moderator, please just be patient. We should be okay. We think we've got a solution through hotspotting and lots of some helpful colleagues co-hosting for me today. But please just bear that in mind in case we have any connectivity issues. But everything should be okay. That is just precautionary. But because we're going to have our video off, I'm going to quickly say hello. Hi everyone. You can see me. Rob, can you quickly say yeah? There we are.
Hi everyone. Hello.
Yeah. So some of you may know I'm Sophie. I'm one of the marketing officers. And here with me today is Rob Smith, who is a second line analyst with the service desk. So we have a new face today. He's going to help me deliver this webinar in the next hour. So that's us. We're going to disappear again. So bye-bye. So Rob, can you go to the next slide, please?
Of course.
Thank you. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Just to let you all know that this is being recorded. This is for your benefit so that you can access the recording afterwards, and it will be uploaded to YouTube and sent out to all of you afterwards. So just in case anything's missed, there's an opportunity to pick it up again. You are muted unless you raise your virtual hand. That means if you have any family members or pets or anything running around, we can't hear you. So please don't worry about making any noise in the background. You should only be able to hear us and we will not be disturbed from your side. Now, the way that we like to do this is use the chat box for any issues that you might be having. So please use that for kind of general communication. And please keep all of your questions to the question and answer box. It makes it much easier for me to keep on track of them. And also all of those questions in the Q&A box will be saved so we can follow up with you afterwards, just in case you have any more questions and that we aren't able to answer during this presentation. Someone has actually raised their hand already. Was that on purpose? I can't see who it is at the moment, but if you do have an issue, please please let me know. So Rob, if we go to the next one, please. So I'm not going to go through this because I've already said it twice in quite a lot of detail. But OpenAthens101 was a webinar that we conceptualized due to us wanting basically a better dialogue between ourselves and our librarians. So we want to make sure you're all confident with the software. We want to make sure we have a dedicated time to listen to your questions and listen to your feedback. And we also wanted to make sure you guys know what's happening. So we have a slide at the end from Luke from our product team, in case you guys are interested what the devs at OpenAthens are working on. And yeah, improved dialogue between you and our product team, you and our service desk, and anyone who's customer facing at OpenAthens. So what is today? So if we move on, Rob. So the topics today, as you guys hopefully know, this webinar follows a series of blogs, which was originally created by our business analyst, Andy. And so this webinar follows those blog topics loosely. However, we do take suggestions after each webinar, and we also take into consideration any questions that you guys have given us at the beginning during registration. And so this is what we're going to be covering today. So we're doing redirector links. We'll be going over discovery hints and the domain page as a summary. We're also going to start off with a recap on reporting because we know how important this is. We had so many questions last time we did it, and we thought it would just be a really good idea to go over it again. And having the lovely Rob with us this time, it will give us a completely fresh perspective, and hopefully everyone will learn something, even if, you know, they feel pretty confident already, which is obviously great. So that is what we'll be covering. We're going to be doing this in a demo format, so we won't really be using the slide deck. Rob is going to be sharing his screen and walking you through in real time on an administrator page. If you'd like to take this chance now to open up your own admin site, if you'd like to follow on in that format, as suggested last time, please do. But if not, just yeah, watch along and use the Q&A box whenever you have any questions. I'll be kind of interjecting and interrupting, Rob is the right word, with your questions as and when we go, to make sure they still have relevance when he answers them. So yeah, please just fire away and get as involved as you would like. So that's enough from me. I'm going to shut up now, and we're going to move over to Rob. Rob, are you happy to get going?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so nice to speak to you all. Thank you all for coming. As Sophie was just saying, we're going to start out by looking over some of the, recapping some of the statistics and reporting that you looked at in the previous webinar. And we're going to look at some of these things here. So hopefully we'll address some of these points. What kind of things can you see? What are the different kinds of reports you can do? How can you customize them, save, schedule them, and some other FAQs around that. And then we'll move on to look at those other topics as well. So I'm going to jump over to the admin area. I'm in the admin area for my own organization here, which will look very similar to yours. And I'm going to click on the statistics button up here, and I'm going to click on reporting, which will take me over to the reporting section of the dashboard. And yeah, there'll be some natural pauses as we go through. So if you do have any questions, as Sophie was saying, just raise them and we'll try and either address them as we go through or at various points. So this is our new reporting area. This was created in 2018 to replace the previous reporting area. And right away, when you jump in, you'll find yourself on the dashboard, and you'll have a kind of an overview of your organization and where it kind of what kind of key statistics you've got. So right away, we can see what the top resources are, and this is just a quick snapshot of the resources that have had the most users access them in either the last 24 hours, 7 days, or 30 days. This box here shows us the total authentications. And when we say total authentications, really we just mean the total number of sign-ins in this period of time. And over here, we can see the total number of accounts that your organization has as of the day before. By the way, an interesting reporting FAQ, and also quite a common question, there's usually approximately a 2 to 3 hour delay between events happening, so users signing in, for example, and the appearing in the dashboard. This box here, though, will show you the total accounts total as of the day before. Down here as well, we can see a little heat map of where users have signed in, so which countries and regions. You can see that all the sign-ins for my organization here, which is kind of a testing organization, have been in the UK. You might have users in different countries though. That could be students or researchers or kind of other kind of users accessing from home perhaps, or from remote locations. So it's quite interesting to have a breakdown of where your accesses have come from. So this is kind of the entry point into the reporting dashboard. So down here on the left-hand side, we have some options here which can provide you a little bit more granular information. Essentially, we have in the Data Explorer, we have the option to look at reports based on accounts and based on resources. I think it's generally most useful to think about accounts as who is accessing your resources, or who is accessing resources through OpenAthens, and resources as what they're accessing. So you can kind of break your reports down in different ways depending on what you're interested in seeing. If I click on the accounts option here, there are three kind of sub-menus. There's totals, authentications, and usage. Totals is going to give us a bit of information about the accounts that I have, or the accounts that you have. Authentications is going to tell us who's trying to access, and usage is going to tell us who successfully accessed. So if I click on the totals here, right away, I can see the total number of accounts that I have in my organization, and they're broken down by different account types. So the vast majority of the accounts in my organization are what are called personal accounts. That might be the same for your organization, or it might say something like local, or it might have a different name. But you can see if you've got different account types here, what type of accounts they are. You can also choose to break this information down by different categories. So as we go through the reporting dashboard on the different pages, we'll see that there are some options in the Data Explorer up here to kind of break down the data by different categories. So instead of breaking it down by account type, I could break it down by status, for example, and then I can see whether or not I have accounts that haven't been activated yet. These are the pending ones that are active, or various other statuses such as banned or disabled. So this gives me a little snapshot of the accounts that I have. I can choose whether I want this to be over a short period of time or over a longer period of time. So if I go back to the start of the year, you can see that the number of accounts by different status has kind of grown in this organization here. And we can also choose to view this as a sort of series graph here, or as a column graph. So you can choose to view this in different ways. So this is kind of the total accounts that I have, and what kind of accounts they are. Now, if we move down to the authentications menu here, we can see who is trying to access, and are they successful. So again, looking at over the last 3 or 4 months, this organization here, 220 successful attempts and 4 failed ones, and they've failed because of an incorrect password being entered. So it's quite useful to see why an authentication attempt has failed. And when I say authentication attempt, I really just mean someone trying to log in through my organization. Currently, this is sort of the granularity here is set to daily. We could break that down to be hourly if we want a really specific snapshot, or monthly. I don't know if I have enough data in my organization to provide very much of a useful breakdown when we use those options. So this kind of gives me it looks like I'm actually just showing one day there. So that's kind of a little breakdown of who's trying to access through my organization. If I go down to the usage option here, we can see a little bit more about the users that are successfully logging in. So by default, this is broken down by permission set. You might only have one permission set in your organization, or you might have quite a lot. So this is telling me which permission sets the users that are logging in belong to. We could break this down by other attributes as well. So we could break it down by the location that they're logging in from, for example. So I've got the vast majority from the UK, but one from the United States in that period of time. And we could also break it down by the network they're coming from. You can also, this is kind of a good point to discuss another common question, which is user identifiable reporting. So by default, none of the categories here will identify an individual user, but you can add that option. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail about that now, but in the schema editor, which I think Blake talked about last week, and which I'm happy to talk about again if there are any questions about it, you can choose to report on some elements or some attributes which would uniquely identify a user. And if you choose to do that, you'll get the option to break the accounts down by whatever you've chosen to use. So I've actually chosen username, but you could choose something like an email address or what have you. That's something that, again, isn't enabled by default, but if your organization requires it, you can choose to enable it. Of course, there are some privacy considerations and so on that you probably want to consider before choosing whether to do that or not. But it's possible to break down by more than just the defaults in here if you choose to. So when I choose that option here, I can see a breakdown of the different accounts and how often they've accessed. So this is kind of the accounts breakdown in the reporting dashboard here. And I guess in summary, this is a way to see who is accessing your resources through OpenAthens. So if we move on now to look at the resources panel here, we can use this to see what's being accessed. So by default, this is going to show me all resources broken down by resource. So what does that mean? So I'm seeing all the resources that users are accessing through my organization, and I can see a breakdown here of the most popular resources to the least popular resources. And I can also see how it changes over time. That's true of all these reports, really. I should have probably mentioned that. So with all the reporting, user and resource reporting, you can see the kind of flow of how it changes over time. So you might be able to use this to identify periods where certain resources are very popular, or periods where there's a general increase in usage or dip in usage. And that might be interesting to sort of see how that matches to maybe your turn times or the way your organization works. You can also break this down to look at specific resources. So I could choose any specific resource that my users have been accessing. And again, you can also break this down by a unique user attribute. So if I want to say, look at resources broken down by username, I've chosen to look at all my resources here, broken down by the resource and the username. I can see which specific resources users are accessing. So this is kind of a really granular breakdown of the resources being accessed here. And again, we can choose to look at this in a column view or in a series view. I think one of the most useful aspects of the resources reporting as well is to see whether the resources you subscribe to, which ones are being have the most kind of demand from your users and which ones maybe have less demand. So this could be quite valuable if you are deciding which resources you want to continue to subscribe to, which resources maybe you don't want to subscribe to. You can get some evidence for your decision based on which resources users are accessing the most. So this is kind of the functionality and purpose of the resources breakdown. What we're really measuring here is the number of times a user has been sent to a resource. So in other words, the number of times a user has logged in and gone to a specific publisher or service provider, whatever whatever the resource may be, and whatever it's called. That's kind of a sort of a recap of the ways in which you can break down the reporting in the Data Explorer.
So just have a quick question, Rob.
Sure.
Someone has just asked, please, can you basically just go over how you'd break down patron category, so end user category, for example, faculty versus undergraduate students, or, another, two different user groups?
Sure, absolutely. So there are a couple of ways in which you could break down your users into different categories. If I leave the reporting area briefly and go back to my admin area, there are a few ways you could do this. So in my admin area here, if I go to resources and permission sets, I've actually got a permission set here, which I call affiliate or affiliate test. The purpose of this permission set, in theory, would be, and again, this is an example organization, I should be clear, but the purpose of this in theory would be I would put users in this permission set who are affiliates of my organization. And you can create as many permission sets as you want to. You just click this add button, you give a permission set a description or a name, and you can allocate your users into one or many permission sets. And then in the reporting area, you can break down your reports, either the resource access reports or the usage reports, by the permission set. So for example, I can break down the accounts I have by permission set. So this gives me a quick way to break down the reports into groups. Does that kind of help to provide a way to do that?
Yeah, well, hopefully. If there's any, if that wasn't clear, please let us know, and we can, we'll go over it again. But we'll I'm sure we'll be told, Rob. There is another
Sure.
question now. So just again, can the usage report track to the particular database name? I think I can only see the vendors.
So the database name, would that be the name of the individual user accessing, or the name of the resource? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
That's okay.
I don't know what they mean. Maybe if you just clarify for both, just so we can.
Sure, that's okay.
Make sure we don't miss anything.
In answer to both. Oh, sorry. Is that a reply coming in? I think.
Can you show attribute reporting in response that user? No, sorry. So there's the question remains the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so breaking users down into permission sets is probably the easiest way, or one way to do that. But I mentioned earlier on that you can customize what you actually report on. So and so hopefully this will answer the question. And if I miss anything, or if this doesn't quite address it, then please let us know, and I'll try and clarify if I miss anything. But I mentioned earlier on that you can customize what you report on. So if I click on the preferences menu here and click on schema editor, these are the default kind of attributes that your users have in OpenAthens. Now, by default, none of these are actually reportable. I've made my username reportable, but none of these would by default be reportable. And as you can imagine, some of these wouldn't uniquely identify a user, but some would. And you mentioned sort of in the original question there, breaking down users by faculty. Well, one of the default attributes is department. You can actually create custom attributes. So you can drag and drop additional attributes from the left-hand side here and give them any name you want. So you could create one called faculty to apply to students or users. So that would be entirely possible. But the department one here would also kind of quite closely match that. And as you can imagine as well, some of these would more uniquely identify a user than others. So for example, department wouldn't really identify one user, it would identify a group. But an email address, for example, or a student number would identify an individual user. To make any of these reportable is as simple as hovering over the right-hand side of the line, and a mark as reportable button will appear. I click that and a small reportable tag appears, and then I can save my changes. So creating an attribute or using an existing attribute and making it reportable is easily done through the schema editor. And from that point onwards, any user who has that attribute set who logs in, that will be logged in the reporting, and you can use it as a category to report on. Does that kind of help to address that?
Yeah, so I think the question was referring to when they said database name, I think they meant resource. Thinking about it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, but that
So,
was still helpful because we have another question on the schema editor afterwards. So it's a
oh,
good.
okay. Well, hopefully, no, that's brilliant. Hopefully that addresses them in reverse order.
Yes,
So
yeah. So,
that's good.
well, yeah, I'll go on to that one. But yeah, I think it was tracking to particular resource name. Yeah.
That's a very good question. So, in other words, if a resource on here is with the name in the catalog, I have to admit I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know whether or not so the name you see on the resource column here is the name pulled from the resource catalog. So if you're in the admin area and you click on resources and go to resource catalog, the name is the descriptive name from the resource catalog of the resource in that part of the admin area. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. No, that's cool. It's a really good question.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you'd cut out then because I thought that natural pause was you disappearing. I had a bit of a panic.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, so if any of that wasn't clear, please do let us know because we'll try our hardest to try to explain based on your question. So going back to the schema editor, someone has said the schema editor isn't showing for me. Is there a way to enable it, or do you know a reason why they might not be able to see it?
Yeah, if the schema editor isn't showing for you, it's most likely that you that your organization is a suborg of another organization. So the schema editor will only appear, I think, if you're the top level organization in your sort of tree. So sometimes an organization will be underneath another umbrella organization. And if that's the case, changes to the schema editor have to be made at the top level. And it'll only appear in the admin area for the top level, for the top org.
Cool. Thank you so much.
That's the most likely explanation. If that's not the case for you, or if you think there's something else going on there, we could potentially pick that up after the webinar, and that might be something we can connect with our support team about and just double check to make sure there's nothing else going wrong there.
Yeah, so I've taken Leslie's name down.
Okay,
if you do have any other problems, Leslie, please let me know. But I'll make a note of that to check up on you afterwards. Okay, and finally, so this is the last one before we move on, because I'm getting a bit cautious of time, because we want to focus on the redirector links next. Someone has asked, can you report on article level?
Ooh, that's a very good question. No, unfortunately, we can't. So we can't report on the actual article level, I'm afraid. And the reason for that essentially is uh, once the what we're essentially tracking it up until this point is which website essentially, or which website really the user went to after they logged in. Unfortunately, we don't really have any way to see which, at least not that I'm aware of, we don't have any way to see which articles or which resource the user goes to. So I'm afraid that's not included in our reporting.
Yeah, no
But yeah, it's a
problem.
very good question.
Awesome. So that's all the questions for now.
Okay, okay.
So based on reporting, so I'm quite keen to get moving on to redirector links, because this is going to be a brand new topic for everyone. But as always, guys, if you do have any other questions, as I have said millions of times already in the 26 minutes we've been doing this, please just let us know, and we'll do our best to try and help you. Right,
No,
back to you, Rob.
absolutely.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Sophie. That's brilliant. Yeah. So we can move on to redirect links in 1 moment. Just a very brief final word on reporting. You can also download these reports. So you can click the little down arrow here. You can save the report either onto your computer, or you can create a saved report, which will go into this little folder on the left-hand side. And you can also schedule reports. So you can, if you've built a report that is very useful for you, it can run automatically every month, week, or day, and it can be emailed to you or to someone else if there's someone else in your organization who needs that kind of information. So it's quite useful to know that those options are there as well. So yeah, I think with that then, because I think, as you say, so if you're conscious of time, we'll move on to look at redirector links. So I'll return to the admin area now of my organization here. Oh, is that a question coming in there, Sophia? Is that?
So I was on mute. Yes, it is. So API for reporting would be nice, so we can lay it into other web pages, dashboards, etc.
Oh, okay. I think there is we don't have an API for reporting at the moment, but I think it is a proposed. I can't remember if it's either a proposed enhancement or if it's actually being worked on at the moment. I have to admit, it's not part of the roadmap that I'm familiar with. I think it might be covered on Luke's slide, Sophie.
Yeah, and I've actually just had word from Rob, our head of sales, who's listening in, and he said we are developing an API currently.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
so we've
Okay,
got
yeah.
lots of ears listening. So yeah, that is coming, and yeah, we'll hopefully be able to provide you with some more information as of when it's available.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so that's a coming soon then. Perfect. Okay, fantastic. Well, with that, then we'll take a look at redirector links. So some of you might be familiar with redirector links already. Some of you might not be. I think this is a topic that was requested from the previous webinar with Blake. And fundamentally, a redirector link is a way to share a link to content that you have to log in to see. So there might be many situations where you want to share a link to to students, to users, researchers, perhaps as individually or as part of a reading list. And you want those users to visit an article, a specific resource page, but they have to go through a login point to see it. And you might want to avoid those users having to navigate through a login point first by themselves, or have to sort of find that content themselves. So in the admin area, if we click on the resources menu here and click on redirect to link generator, there's a handy tool here. And what this will do is it will generate links that you can distribute to your users for that purpose. Now, generally speaking, I would copy and paste probably the specific article or resource that you have in mind into this field here, because that's probably the easiest way to do it. I'm just going to do what I wouldn't normally do and type in a website that I know will work. And this is going to generate me a redirector link, which just goes to their homepage. And you could copy this link and give it to your users. So this is kind of a really simple way to create a link that end users can can use to log in. There's no limit to the number of redirect links you can create. Doing it one by one is possible through this link generator tool here. But if you've got a long reading list, a very long, a large list of resources, list of articles, you can generate redirect links for all of them as a batch by clicking on this choose file here and uploading a CSV or a text file. So if you've got a text file reading list, you can just pop them all through the redirector generator here. And then you've got a list of links which when users use them, they'll be prompted to log in and taken straight to the resource. So it will make it a little bit easier for your users to find content. If you type in a website here, which or you copy paste a resource in here, sometimes you might see a little alert suggesting that we don't support linking to that resource. And that's because there's a little bit of work that's required to be done on the part of a publisher to support the redirector. So, you might see a friendly message here in text underneath the link saying, if you put in a certain link saying, oh, we don't support generating a link to that resource, and that's nothing to worry about. That's to be expected if the publisher doesn't support linking to that resource. So that's kind of a very easy way to generate redirector links. You might be wondering which of your resources you can generate links for and which of the resources you can't. If you go to the resource catalog by clicking on the resources menu at the top of the admin area here and clicking on catalog, you'll see all of the resources available in the OpenAthens Federation that you can access here, and you'll see that many of them have a little tick mark underneath them here. And if you hover over it, you'll see it says redirector compatible. So that's a little hint that you'll be able to create redirector links to that resource. But in some cases you won't see it, and if you don't see it, that's a hint that we can't create redirector links for that resource at the moment. So that's kind of a very brief kind of introduction to how to generate redirector links. Some of you, and this is a little bit more of a kind of an extra step. It's not something that's required knowledge or required to do at all. But some of you may be familiar with wafeless linking, particularly if you've used other technologies as well as OpenAthens. The redirector uses wafeless linking behind the scenes. If you click on a resource in the catalog that has this little flag, this little redirector compatible symbol, you'll see the wafeless link catalog. If you're not sure what I mean by a wafeless link, or if you've never used wafeless links, it's totally fine. You don't need to worry about that at all to use the redirector. In fact, we'd encourage using the redirector and not worrying about wafeless links. But for those of you who are wondering or who've used wafeless linking in the past, that's kind of a bit of information about how that works behind the scenes. Was that a question I saw coming in, Sophie? Maybe not.
I was muted. I keep doing that. Sorry, yeah, we do have a few questions. You can hear me, can't you? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll count. So there's a few questions in there. So you might need to. It's from Alexandra in the chat. Can you see that? Because there's a few levels to this question. So the first bit is saying, do we use redirector links to put links in our libguides pages? The next bit was, does it take the user to the resource or prompt for an OA authentication? And then the last part is, if they are already behind OA authentication, is the link then seamless? That's a lot of sections, Rob. Do you want me to do it bit by bit? Or
no, that's fine. I think we definitely have time to address those questions. Would you mind just going through them one by one, sorry, Sophie?
Yes, first. So first one is, do we use redirector links to put links in our libguides pages?
That is a very good question. I have to admit, I'm not very familiar with libguides. From anecdotally, from having seen customers use LMS systems like libguides, I think you can, but I'm not going to say yes or no definitely right now. I'm going to say that might be a question for us to look at on the service desk and just double check.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm writing Alexandra's name down, so I'll make sure we follow up with her
sure.
on that. So the next part is, does it take the user to the resource or prompt for an OA authentication?
So that's a great question. The first time a user clicks on that link, it'll ask them to log in, and then they'll be seamlessly taken to the page after they log in. And then after that, if they were to use another redirector link, they won't be prompted to log in again. So they just need to log in once, and then they'll have they'll be logged in. So it's kind of like a single sign-on kind of thing.
Yeah, and then if they are already behind OA authentication, is the link then seamless? which is
Yeah, exactly.
similar to what you said. Yeah.
Indeed, yes. So if they're already signed in, they won't be prompted to sign in again.
Fabulous. So based on what you just said there, we have, based on the libguides, we have a suggestion from Scott who said you could use the prefix functionality in libguides and have the redirector act like a proxy prefix. I have no idea what that means, but I'm going to pass that to you, Rob.
Again, I think I'm going to probably defer to our service desk for that. It sounds like something that it sounds possible, but I'd have to probably look into that a little bit more. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But I know
yeah.
that's Scott from Millersville who's asked that question. So Scott, thank you very much. And
yeah, it's definitely a great question.
It is a great question. And you said, so you could use the prefix functionality in libguides and have the redirect act like a proxy prefix. The downside is the links are technically properly encoded, for anyone who is interested. Thank you, Scott. Please keep your comments coming because it's really nice to have your support. So we have a few more questions. So the next one is, do I generate a redirect link and provide to a vendor for a database trial?
You probably wouldn't need to give a redirector link to a vendor. So I'm going to infer that by the vendor here, you're referring to the publisher, to the service provider. So you probably wouldn't need to give the redirector links to the publisher, to the vendor. It would be more for your end users, really, more to provide to people wanting to sign in.
Okay. Lovely. Sorry, I cut you off a little bit there. Do you have any more for that question, or was that?
No. That's sorry, Sophie. No, that's that's
fabulous.
Yeah.
Cool. So the next one is, what if my colleague doesn't have access to the OpenAthens admin to use the redirect link generator? Can we still,
Yes, we have a public redirector link generator. I don't have the URL to it offhand, but we can. Implementation, and I think we can send it to you after the webinar. I think if you can make a note of that.
Of course, yeah.
We do have a public link generator. Essentially, it's just a website you can go to where you specify your organization and pop in the URL. So yeah, yes, absolutely, it should be possible to do that. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you so much. Yeah, guys, I'll make sure I send that out to all of you in your follow-up email after this. After the webinar recording has gone live. So another question: if any resource we can't find in the resource catalog, what should we do with it? Is it a custom resource?
That's a very good question. So if you can't find a resource in the catalog, what you should do depends a little bit, I think, on what kind of resource it is. So if it's a resource which you're expecting to log in through OpenAthens, so you're expecting to see let's say, for example, you could see an OpenAthens login button on the website, or they've suggested that you should be able to log into OpenAthens, but you can't find it. That's probably one to ask us about. It'd probably be worth asking us what the resource is, because it might there might be something a little bit unusual going on, or it might have a different name, or it might be part of a bigger resource. If it's a resource that you want to make available to your users, but it doesn't really require logging in, absolutely. You can go to the custom resource tab in here, and you can add a custom resource. Adding a custom resource will prompt you to pop in a title. In fact, I think a title is the only mandatory field, although it probably makes sense to put in a URL as well, and potentially for that description. And if your users are logging in through the MyAthens website, they'll be able to see that as a resource. So you could use this to provide a link to maybe a library page that you have, which doesn't require login, but which is useful for users, or any other content that you want to point users to that doesn't require a login. Hope that addresses that.
Awesome, thank you. So then we have another question which says, what is the difference or reason to use the redirect instead of allocating, or do you have to allocate and then provide a redirect link?
That's a very, very good question. You don't need to allocate a resource to use the redirector. The redirector will work even if you don't allocate a resource. Allocating resources is mainly a question for if you are actively trying to restrict access to certain groups of users. I won't go into a huge amount of detail about this in this session because I'm conscious of time, and it's a bit of a separate topic unto itself. It might be worth us delving into this in a bit more detail in the next webinar potentially, Sophie. But in brief, if you're using permission sets, so to go back to what I was kind of alluding to earlier on, from the resources menu, I can put users into different groups here based on their permission sets, and then I could say only users in this permission set or only users in this permission set can access certain resources. So I can then allocate resources, and I can put the resources into certain groups as well, and I can sort of kind of break down access into different groups of users. So if you're actively using, we call that restrictive mode. So if you're actively restricting access to certain resources to certain groups of users, that's when you would really want to be allocating resources. Otherwise, it's not essential to allocate resources, and the redirector will allow users to log in regardless. Now, that's a separate question to whether or not you actually subscribe to the resource. So you'll need to have a subscription with a given publisher or vendor for the user to actually be given access. Otherwise, they'll go through they'll log into OpenAthens, but they might not actually be able to view any content if you're not subscribing to a given publisher. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Fabulous. Well, yeah, I've written down your question, Bonnie, and then Scott again has recommended access control, permission sets, etc. would be a great topic coupled with user attributes for the next one. So
absolutely, yeah, we should definitely do that.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Bonnie, and thank you, Scott. Scott, I might have to get you on as our next guest speaker at this rate, if you keep giving us all these good suggestions. Fabulous. So that's all the questions I think that we have for redirector links. But as I said before, because this is the first time we've ever gone over this, please let us know if you'd like this to be covered again quickly in the next one, or if you have any other questions, yeah, you can get in contact through the various ways that I'll go through at the end of this webinar. So Rob, I think it's cool to kind of move on to the next section, and just for you guys, because I know I'm very conscious of time, these sections are much smaller. So yeah, I think we're definitely due to finish on time.
Absolutely. In fact, I think I haven't been using the PowerPoint as much as I should have done. We've covered redirector links, I think, and I think we're going to next look at the domain page in the admin area and some discovery hints. So I'm gonna move on to look at the, and I think these are both topics which arose from questions in the previous webinar. I think, so if I click on the preferences menu here and go to the domain section, this is where you can customize a few things specific to your organization. So there are a few options up here. You can choose how quickly non-activated accounts are deleted, which is kind of useful. These options here are a little bit more commonly used. You can choose what happens to users after they sign out. So once a user logs out or after a user activates their account, you could forward them to a specific location. And this is pretty useful. So for example, you could have them be forwarded to a specific library page, or if you've got a page on your organization's website, which provides some useful FAQs or useful information to your users. That's possible to direct users there after they log out or after they activate their account for the first time. So this is useful. And there's a little bit of information here you can use to customize the sign-in page as well. So you can choose a logo and some introductory text and a few options here, most of which are fairly straightforward to customize. There's one other really useful thing as well, which is actually not hiding in this menu here. I'm going to click on the My Account button in the top right corner here, and I'm going to click on Organization, and I can specify a few specific elements unique to my organization here, including some domain discovery hints and a geolocation here. And these are hints that would be provided to a user as they're signing in, so that they can have a bit of extra information about to help them find the correct organization. Geolocation is especially interesting. If you can find your latitude and longitude, which you can get from Google, essentially, just by Googling what's my latitude and longitude and pop it in here, some of publishers now increasingly are using that to find customers that are geographically close to them. So you might be familiar with when you navigate to a publisher's website, to a vendor's website, sometimes you'll be asked to select your organization from a long list of organizations. And sometimes if you're type in the name of your organization, you might see a few similar organizations or a few matches. We have a tool called Wayfinder that an increasing number of publishers are using, and some other publishers use other kind of similar tools, which will actually show the organizations in the order of kind of proximity. So in other words, you can see a publisher that's maybe in the same country as you, or the same region as you, above a publisher that's maybe less likely to be one that you're using. All of this is optional, by the way, so none of this is required. None of this is something you necessarily need to fill out. But it's these are some kind of what some of these options do in the admin area. And I think that is the entirety of the demo content that we wanted to cover today, Sophie.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rob. I'm just going to kind of leave it open again for if anyone has any questions. I know those, those points there were more simple along the other bits, but we do actually have a question that's just come in. Mm-hmm. So, is there a way of directing students to the Find Your Organization box on the OpenAthens login page? My students nearly always put credentials in the username and password box and get nowhere. That's a really good question.
Okie dokie, I see. So I think that question, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think that question is probably alluding to when users see a login box which has the username and password on the left-hand side and the Find Your Organization feature on the right. Depending on how your organization is set up, yes, it may be possible to forward users straight on to your login point. The way we do that is by changing a few settings in your connections tab. That's probably a little bit beyond the scope of this webinar, because there are a few things to take into account, and the specific way you would have that set up kind of depends on a few factors. So I'm going to suggest that we take that up with our service desk and take a look at the way your organization's set up and see if we can change that. It might not be possible, unfortunately, but we can look into it for sure.
Is the answer to that question possibly the redirector?
It will depend on redirector links. Taking your if redirect links are currently taking your users to a login screen where they have to choose their organization, it's probably because in the connections tab here, you probably have more than one local connector, or not a default one. So the redirector combined with changing a setting here may be the solution to that. But but it depends on how your organization is configured. So I'll probably suggest we unpack that a bit further on outside of the webinar, I think.
Yeah, that's no problem. I have Tracy's name written down, so you can get back to her with that one. And another question, what was the discovery domain hints for? Do you have any examples?
Oh, I actually don't have an example to hand. I'd have to, I think probably the best thing is if we send over a link to our docs for that, which has I think a few examples in it, but I don't have an example I can demonstrate, I'm afraid.
No, that's fine. Again, Sue, I can follow up with you. I'm writing your name down here, so we can. I can contact you about that afterwards for some examples. Can't get my words out. Awesome, great. So does anyone else have any questions? I know we're kind of reaching the end here, but I just want to give anyone else the chance, just in case they have any other questions, because I know it's been quite a lot of information today. I know some of it was a recap, but in case anyone else has any, please take this chance to ask us whilst we have Rob on the line. I'll just leave it for a few seconds. So we've just had a few thank yous for some people. I thought I'll pass it over to you, Rob,
Oh,
which is
that's
really
absolutely
sweet.
thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to do this.
Um,
It's been really nice. So
yeah,
thank you very much.
no
Appreciate
problem
that.
at all. Whilst you go back to the slides, Rob, is that
Of
okay? And I'll
course.
just kind of forward it. So someone
Absolutely.
else has said, the link generator was a revelation. I never knew you did this. I've always painstakingly created links from scratch. Thank you for a great session.
Oh,
That's
thank
why
you.
we
No, I'm
do
glad it
this.
was useful.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
yeah. We've just actually had a quick one other question
Oh, sure.
based for the report. So I just enabled email for my reports, email for my reportable. How long until it shows up on the dashboard?
I think you'll only be able to break it down by reporting once at least one user has signed in. And it will be, I think, 2 to 3 hours after the first user signs in, after the first one is. Let me start the sentence again. I think it'll be 2 to 3 hours after the first user with an email address is recorded, if that makes sense.
Okay, if that you still want some more info on that, Bonnie, please let us know. I'm going to finish off now, and we'll give Rob a bit of a break. So just to remind you all, we do have our virtual learning environment for our OpenAthens administrators. So it's a set of courses that go from basic to advanced, where you can basically do self-learning on all the kind of different attributes within our hosted product. It's not there to replace our support team or anything, obviously, but if you guys are interested in kind of taking on that learning yourself and understanding the product a bit further, those are there for you. So just wanted to make sure, you guys are aware of those. The next slide, please, Rob. And on top of that, another resource we have is our documentation. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before and have been referred to the documentation when speaking to various members of our team. But it is there for your benefit. It has lots of information on it, especially to do with reporting and redirector links, as we've gone over today. And you should find that on our website. And that's also a really helpful tool in order to answer any of your questions. However, like I said, it's not replacement for our support team. They're there to help you. So there's lots of different ways you can get some help if you need it. So next slide, please. So as I said at the beginning, we do offer a quick kind of past, present, future from our product team. I'm not going to go through this line by line because it's way over my head, but the slides will be available, and obviously this is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to see the slide. And it's just a little bit of information on the recent work that our development team have been doing, and the work that is currently in progress. We don't have any kind of dates or timelines for this, but it's there for your information if you are interested reading after this webinar. And on to the next one. So I think we can kind of skim through these, Rob, because we've gone through questions as we've been going. Future topics, sorry. Actually, I'll go back to the next one. For any of you guys who are still on the line, if you do have any future topics, please let us know. As I said, we do follow a format, and we already do have one topic suggested by Scott. But if you guys have anything else, even if you want to hear this again, that is absolutely fine. This is the kind of feedback we want in order to improve these webinars and make them as useful as possible for you. So please let me know in any way that you'd like, whether using this chat box over the next couple of minutes or sending us an email. So over to the next slide. That is us done. I want to say, and yes, sorry, Alexander, we will be emailing you the link. Yes, just saw your question pop up. Yes, we will be. You have all this information afterwards. So I just want to take the chance to thank Rob Smith, who has been absolutely amazing. I think you can all agree that he is an absolutely amazing presenter and very knowledgeable. So thank you to Rob on behalf of not just me, but the entire commercial team. Thank you so much for helping us out. And we hope you will do one of these again in the future, but I know this is not your day job. So thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, Sophie. No worries at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. And the next one of these will be at the end of May, so the last Thursday of every month. So the 28th of May will be the next webinar. All information will get sent to you, so I'll make sure you guys don't miss out on anything. And yeah, thank you very much. See you all soon. And thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.